Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Urha. Let's begin. So, chapter 28. This venerable one's mind is in a bit of a mess. The news that Yuheng Elder was being punished for breaking the rules spread as if it had sprouted a pair of wings. It didn't even take until the next morning. Practically everyone in the sect found out that very night. 200 strikes would probably beat an ordinary person to death. Even for a cultivator, it would still be quite unbearable. Xuemeng jumped to his feet when he heard. What? Shizun went to the discipline hall? The discipline court? Young master, please hurry and talk to the sect leader. Shizun is already injured. How could he possibly endure 200 strikes? Xuemeng was so anxious that he was just about to lose it. My dad? That won't do. He's still not back from Tashui Palace yet. A message by bird won't arrive until tomorrow at the earliest. Why didn't you guys stop Shizun? Moran and Shimei exchanged a glance. Stop Chuaning? Who in this entire world was capable of that? Damn it, I'm gonna go after him right now. Xuemeng dashed off toward the discipline court in a hurry. He hadn't even entered the courtyard yet when he spotted a group of Jailu Elder's disciples crowded around the doors to the main hall, whispering amongst themselves. What are you all doing standing there? Get out of my way! Move! Young master! Ah, the young master is here. Make way for the young master. The disciples quickly parted to the sides to let Xuemeng through. The doors of Clear Sky Hall stood open. Chuaning knelt inside with his back straight and eyes closed, not speaking a word. Jailu Elder, holding a metal rod, was reading the rules of Shisheng Peak aloud, each rule accompanied by one brutal strike of the metal rod to Chuaning's back. The 91st rule of this sect: do not injure the innocent. Do not use cultivator techniques against the common people. Under the rod, do you have any complaints? No complaints. The 92nd rule of this sect: do not act rashly of one's own accord. Do not indulge in self-gratification. Under the rod, do you have any complaints? No complaints. Jailu Elder did not dare to go easy in the punishment. 90 or so strikes, and Chuaning's white robes were already soaked through with blood. Xuemeng held Chuaning in the highest esteem. His eyes became instantly bloodshot at the sight, and he called out at the top of his lungs, Shizun! Chuaning pretended not to hear. His eyes remained closed, a slight furrow between his brows. Jailu Elder glanced over to the door and said quietly, Yuheng Elder, the young master is here. I'm not deaf, I hear. Blood trickled out from the corner of his lips, but he still did not look up. He's just being a noisy child. Pay him no mind. Jailu Elder sighed. Yuheng, is this really necessary? It can't be helped that my disciples are always being disobedient. Chuaning spoke mildly. If I do not receive my due punishment today, how will I have the face to discipline anyone else in the future? ... Please continue. Sigh. Jailu Elder looked at Chuaning's pale, delicate neck, exposed above the open collars, drooping gently down like thin mist, and couldn't help but suggest, then at least go easier? That would be no different from deception, Chuaning said. Don't worry, it's just 200 strikes. I can handle it. Yuheng Elder! Jailu, there is no need to say any more. Continue. The metal rod fell once again. Even Xuemeng's voice became distorted. Jailu Elder, are you still not effing stopping? Have you no regard for your young master? That's my Shizun you're hitting, my Shizun! Jailu Elder could only force himself to pretend not to hear. Xuemeng's lungs were about to explode from anger. Have you gone deaf, you shitty old man? Your young master's ordering you to stop. If you dare to hit him again, He got stuck on I and couldn't think of what to say. He was only a 15-year-old youth after all. Darling of the heavens or not, his strength and status were still far below the elders. In the end, red-faced, he could only choke out an obstinate, I'll tell my dad! Jailu Elder, ... Chuaning let out a near imperceptible sigh. 97 strikes, 98 strikes, 99 strikes, 100 strikes. Even the fabric became ripped from the strikes. The blood was appallingly red. Xuemeng couldn't handle any more. Eyes red with panic, he made to recklessly charge into the hall. But Chuaning suddenly opened his eyes and brandished a hand, and a barrier immediately split the space in two, blocking off the door and forcing Xuemeng back away several steps, falling to the ground. Chuaning coughed blood, a pair of narrowed phoenix eyes harsh as lightning. Disgraceful. Go back where you came from. Shizun! Chuaning said harshly. Since when could Shisheng Peak's young master order Jelu Elder to bend the rules? Hurry and get lost. Xuemeng stared wide-eyed at him, a shimmer of wetness in his eyes. Moran stood to the side, stroking his chin. The corners of his lips still curled. Ayya, oh no, the little phoenix is gonna cry. At these words, Xuemeng whipped his head around and glared at Moran. His eyes were rimmed in red, but he stubbornly refused to let the tears fall. He didn't complain and didn't talk back. Only crawled up from the ground and dusted himself off with head lowered and teeth gritted. Then knelt facing Clear Sky Hall. Shizun, this disciple was wrong. Chuaning was still enduring the strikes. Back held ramrod straight and never once bending, but his face was pale and there was a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. Xuemeng continued stubbornly. But I'm not leaving. I'm going to keep Shizun company. Saying so, he knelt and refused to get up. Moran's eyes were about to roll out of their sockets. Xuemeng, Ziming, darling of the heavens, would only lower himself to this extent in front of Chuaning. He was a phoenix to everyone else, but a quail to Shizun. If Moran wasn't so certain that Xuemeng had no interest in men, he'd probably wonder if he had a crush on Chuaning, to be so hell-bent and without regret. If Shizun were to slap him, the little quail would humbly turn the other cheek. All right. Brown-noser extraordinaire. His heart felt contempt, but his mouth tasted sour for some reason. Moran glared at Xuemeng for a while, growing more agitated the longer he looked, thinking that he couldn't let him be the only one to show devotion. Moran is getting jealous. Chuaning already didn't like him. With this trick that Xuemeng was pulling, wouldn't he be even more biased in the future? So he knelt as well, next to Xuemeng. I'll keep Shizun company too. Naturally, Shimei followed suit as well, and all three disciples knelt outside, waiting. The other elders' disciples, hearing the news, all found some excuse or another to come to the discipline court and watch the show. Heavens, how could it be Yuheng Elder? I heard he beat up a common person in a fit of rage. Ah, so scary! Shh, quiet. If Yuheng Elder hears, you'll be next on the whipping block. Someone else. Well, why is the young master kneeling? Mo Gongzi, too. Moran was handsome and charming, and had earned the favor of countless female disciples in his daily life. Quite a few of the onlookers felt sorry for him, whispering, Poor Mo Gongzi, what to do? Should we go make a plea on his behalf? We probably shouldn't meddle in their master-disciple affairs. You can go if you have the guts, but I don't want to die yet. Did you already forget that one Shijie who got whipped some 100 times by Yuheng Elder? 200 strikes finished. The barrier was finally withdrawn. Xuemeng scurried up from the ground and stumbled frantically into Clear Sky Hall. When he got close, he saw Chuaning's condition and let out a furious "Ah!" and turned to grab Jelu Elder by the collars, screaming, You shitty old man! Don't you effing know to at least hold back? Shui Ziming. Chuaning's eyes were closed, blood-stained lips opening and closing, his voice hoarse but commanding. ... Xuemeng's joints cracked audibly as he let Jelu Elder go and shoved him aside. Moran arrived too at this moment, still smiling, thinking that Jelu Elder would have definitely held back on his strikes in consideration of Chuaning's status. But that smile froze abruptly on his face when he looked down at Chuaning's condition. Had he seriously not told Jelu Elder about the injury on his shoulder? The majority of those 200 strikes had landed unsparingly on that shoulder. New wounds on top of the old. Chuaning, have you lost your mind? Moran's pupils contracted, a tidal wave of intense detestation washing over him. He didn't know what exactly it was that he detested, or just what he was so angry about. Only that he had a raging inferno was soaring through his stomach and burning through all of his organs. He was used to Chuaning being tormented to the breaking point at his own hands as he crushed his dignity and defiled his purity. But Moran couldn't stand Chuaning being bruised and scarred at the hands of another. Maybe it was because he couldn't forget what happened in the previous lifetime, but Moran subconsciously felt like this person belonged to him. For him to let live or let die, to be loathed or to be hated, all of that belonged to him. He originally didn't mind Chuaning being punished, thinking that he was an elder, so the 200 strikes definitely wouldn't be of any real force, or at the very least, that the strikes would avoid the yet unhealed wounds on his shoulder. But Chuaning actually hadn't spoken up about it. He hadn't spoken up about it. What was this crazy person being so stubborn about? What was he forcing himself through all this for? What the F was this stupid idiot trying to prove? Oh, Moran is concerned in his own way. At least he has some feelings toward his Shizun right now. Head a complete mess, Moran lifted a hand to go support Chuaning, but Xuemeng had beat him to it and was already helping him up. ... Moran's hand paused in midair, then lowered back down after a while. He watched them walking away, Xuemeng supporting Chuaning, an unknown feeling in his chest. He wanted to follow, but couldn't move his feet. Moran, that feeling that you're feeling is jealousy, and pain that your loved one is injured. I don't know if you noticed, but hopefully you will realize what that means later on. You're just a dumb husky right now, so I understand that you might be a little slow on the uptake of relationships. Everything that had happened in the previous lifetime was in the past. Now, Chuaning was only his Shizun. None of the muddled, hateful, gentle entanglements between them had happened. He shouldn't be having these thoughts. It didn't matter to him who Chuaning got hit by, who he was supported by, who he spent time with, or even if he got killed by someone. None of it had anything to do with him. Shinmei walked up beside him. Come on, let's go with them and take a look. I'll pass. Xuemeng has it covered. I can't help anyway, and too many people will just add to the mess. Moran's expression didn't change, but his mind was in a bit of a mess. He really truly could not understand what it was that he felt right now. Was it hate? He's so dumb! Was it hate? Wow, I am so worried about my Shizun, and only I can hurt him, no one else can. I wonder if that is hate. Shake my head. Okay, author's notes. Bonus character card number 2. Xuemeng, courtesy name Ziming. Nickname, this person hasn't died yet. Occupation, his father is the king of the mountain. He is the young master of the Mountain King. To put it simply, child of an entrepreneur. Social appearance, a cultivation talent that has yet to finish his apprenticeship. To put it simply, unemployed young adult. Current favorite, someone to boast about him, praise him, boast about him to death. Favorite food, hot pot, the abnormally spicy kind. Dislike, no one to boast about him. Height, at the moment, 169 centimeters. After he's fully grown, 178 centimeters. Oh, that was cute, a little information card about Xuemeng. Okay. Yeah, so that was chapter 28. Chuaning went through with the punishment at discipline court, and Xuemeng tried to intervene because he didn't want to see his Shizun being punished. He felt like his Shizun was being unjustly reprimanded for his actions, but they couldn't stop because the rules are rules, and Chuaning himself wanted to abide by the rules that were set. So he went through with the whipping, and then Moran came in to see what happened, thinking, it couldn't be that bad, right? But then he was shocked to find that Chuaning had not spoken up about his injured shoulder and actually took the whippings at full force. And then Moran's feeling these internal feelings within him, thinking, wow, my sworn enemy Chuaning is hurt. Why do I feel so sad about it? Why does it bother me so much? And he thinks it's hatred that he feels toward his Shizun. Okay, Moran. Dumb husky. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 29. This venerable one doesn't want you to die. Ooh, okay. I like the sound of this chapter. Okay. That night, Moran lay in his bed on Shisheng Peak with his hands behind his head, staring at the roof beams above, completely unable to sleep. The events of the past played out in his mind, one by one, until finally, in the end, every bit, each fragment was Chuaning's face, elegant to the point of being cold. If truth be told, Moran never understood just how he felt about this person. The first time he'd seen him had been under the flowering tree in front of the heaven-piercing tower. He had been wearing a loose robe with wide sleeves, the only one out of the 20 elders who was not dressed in the fetching silver-blue armor of Shisheng Peak. That day, fiddling absent-mindedly with the armored claw on his hand with his head lowered, his profile had looked focused yet gentle, like a white cat bathed in warm golden sunlight. Moran had stared from afar and hadn't been able to look away. It was love at first sight for him. His first impression of Chuaning had been positively glowing. but it had not held up against the negligence, the punishments, and the cold harshness that had followed, one after the other. That white cat's sharp teeth and claws had left him covered in wounds. He'd been barely hanging onto life by a thread when Uncle had saved him from the sea of fire. He thought that, once at Shizun Peak, he would have a Shizun to treat him with compassion, to care for him with sincerity. But how hard he tried to please, however much work he put in, it was as if Chuan-Ning saw none of it. Conversely, the smallest mistakes earned him a round of ruthless lashings, and he came out raw and bleeding every time. Later, he learned that Chuan-Ning looked down on him from the bottom of his heart. Deficient by nature, beyond remedy. Was this what that person standing under the flowering tree, robes white as snow, thought of him? He'd once regarded Chuan-Ning as the cold moon in the ninth heaven, had wholeheartedly revered him, adored him. But what was he to that cold moon, really? A disciple he had no choice but to accept, a lowlife who was lowly to the bone, a no-good child raised in a brothel, a filthy reprobate. Oh no, there's definitely a misunderstanding here. Oh no, Moran just wants Shizun's approval, and he thought that Shizun really hated him down to the core. No, Shizun actually has a crush on you, Moran. He's just really embarrassed about it, so he can't tell you. He's a tsundere, you know? Tsundere, you know how they are, right? Cold on the outside and warm and fuzzy on the inside. Moran always laughed it off like he didn't care, but he'd slowly begun to hate Chuan-Ning, a kind of hatred mixed with an aggressive unwillingness to yield. He refused to accept it. Ever since, holding on to the resentment he felt that grew by the day, he'd kept provoking Chuan-Ning in attempts to get his attention, his praise, his astonishment. He just wanted to be loved by his Shizun. During that time, if Shinmei had praised him with well done, he would have flown into the sky with happiness. But if Chuan-Ning had been willing to give him a not bad, he would have gladly given his life. But Chuan-Ning never praised him. No matter how hard he tried, how diligent he was, how well he did, that aloof person never gave more than a slight nod before turning his face away. Moran was about to lose it. Heaven knew how much he wanted to grab Chuan-Ning by the face back then and make him turn around, force him to look back at himself, to see himself, to take that deficient by nature beyond remedy back. But he could only kneel before Chuan-Ning like a docile stray dog, lowering his head and saying with the utmost respect, "This disciple will keep Shizun's teachings in mind." In front of Chuan-Ning, Mo Yu was lowly to the bone. Even if he was a young master, he was still worthless. He finally understood that someone like Chuan-Ning would never look at him with anything but contempt. Even later, after many things had happened, Moran took over Shizun Peak, then took aim at the top and became the first ever emperor of the cultivation world. Underneath his dark banner, everyone trembled with fear and dared not even speak his name in more than the quietest of whispers. No one remembered his stain, his unmentionable origins. Henceforth, there was no more Mo Yu, only Ta Xianjun. Ta Xianjun. Everyone hated him to the extreme. Monstrous Mo Yu. May he be damned to eternity without rebirth or redemption. Ta Xianjun, Mo Yu, Ta Xianjun, Mo Yu, Ta Xianjun. Oh no, he's losing himself. Ta Xianjun. But so what if they were scared? Shizun Peak still reverberated with the rumble of voices shouting in unison as thousands prostrated before him in front of Wushan Palace, all those heads bowing to him in veneration. Long live Emperor Ta Xianjun! He'd felt fantastic, until he'd seen Chuan-Ning's face in the crowd. Chuan-Ning's cultivation had already been abolished by then. He was tied up below the hall, reduced to a mere prisoner beneath the steps. Moran had already decided to execute him, but he didn't want Chuan-Ning to have a quick and easy death, so he'd shackled his limbs, cut a small gash in the artery of his neck, and enchanted the wound to not congeal. Blood trickled out drop by drop, life drained away bit by bit. How could he do that to his Shizun? The sun blazed overhead. The coronation ceremony had been underway for a while, and Chuan-Ning's blood should have been nearly drained. With this person's death, Moran would finally be freed from his past. Thus, he purposely arranged to have him bled out at his coronation. This way, when he became the master of the cultivation world, Chuan-Ning would be a lifeless corpse. And everything that happened in the past would be wiped clean. Perfect. But why, even at the gates of death, was this person still so indifferent, still so elegant as to be cold? His face was entirely without color, but his expression still impassive. When he looked at Ta Xianjun, there was neither praise nor fear, only revulsion, disdain, and... Moran thought he must have gone mad, or else Chuaning must have gone mad, and a hint of pity. Chuaning, who was on the verge of death, who had been defeated by him, pitied him. He actually pitied him. He who stood at the apex above all else, who held boundless power. He actually dared? The rage that had piled up over more than 10 years finally drove Moran mad. Right there at Loyalty Hall, already renamed Wushan Palace by then, in front of the thousands of people gathered there, surrounded by the thundering of their acclamation and flattery, he abruptly stood up, black robes billowing, and walked down the steps. In front of all those people, he grabbed Chuaning by the jaw, a sweet yet menacing smile on his twisted face. Shizun, today is a happy occasion for this disciple. Why aren't you celebrating? The thousands of people fell instantly into a deathly silence. Chuaning was neither deferential nor domineering. His expression cold as ice as he said, I have no disciple like you. Moran burst out laughing, the sound of his unrestrained laughter circling the stoda of the Golden Hall like so many vultures. Shizun is so heartless. This venerable one is disappointed. He laughed as he spoke, voice resounding. You have no disciple like me? Who taught me my cultivation then? Who taught me my martial arts? And my cold-blooded ruthlessness? Who taught me that? And the whip scars all over my body that still will not fade? Let me ask you, who gave me those? He stopped smiling, voice suddenly vicious, a cold light in his eyes. Chuaning, are you that ashamed of having a disciple like me? Are my bones too lowly, or is it my blood that's too filthy? Let me ask you, Chuaning, let me ask you, what does deficient by nature beyond remedy mean? He was going out of his mind, voice twisting as he bellowed. You've never seen me as your disciple, never thought anything of me, but I really did see you as my teacher, really did respect you, adored you. Why did you treat me like this? Why did you never spare me so much as a single word of praise? Why is it that no matter what I did, I could never even the slightest bit of approval from you? Never get the slightest bit of approval from you. Chuaning's entire body shuddered, face growing even paler. Those phoenix eyes widened slightly as he stared at Moran. His lips moved, as if wanting to say something, but nothing came out in the end. Everyone who used to be at Shisheng Peak was gone by now. The last two left from those bygone days stared at one another just like this. Moran seemed to finally calm down in the uncomfortable silence that followed. He closed his eyes, and when they opened again, he once again wore that detestable smile that made people shiver. He said gently and cordially, Shizun, haven't you always looked down on me? Always thought I was lowly? He paused, gaze sweeping across the thousands kneeling before his palace like so many crouching dogs, all in acknowledgement of him as the overlord of the cultivation world, above mortal affairs. Moran smiled. How about now? Before you die, let me ask you again. In this world, just who is the lowly one, and who is the respectable one? Who's the one stepping on whom? Who won in the end? Who lost? Chuaning's eyelashes were lowered, as if still lost in Moran's confession from a moment ago. Finally, Moran gripped his jaw and forcefully tilted his head back. But in that instant, Moran suddenly froze. It was the first time he'd ever seen regret on Chuaning's face. That expression was far too unfamiliar. Moran abruptly pulled back his hand, as if burned. You! Chuaning's expression was pained, as if silently enduring some kind of agony that dug into the bones, some sort of anguish that tore apart the organs. His voice was quiet. It floated in the wind, heard by Moran alone. He said, I'm sorry, Moran. It was this master's fault. Suddenly, the world fell silent. The sound of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the billowing of robes, all of it faded away. There was only Chuaning's face looking up at him. It was the only thing in the entire world that was clear, all that he could see. Much should have passed through his mind at that time. Glee, smugness, ecstasy. But none of it did. There was but one strange thought in his mind then, and only one. When had he gotten so much taller than Chuaning? A lot of time really had passed, and many things had changed. Moran's lips moved haltingly in a whisper. What? What did you say? But Chuaning only smiled, a smile that Moran knew yet also did not. and in that pair of phoenix eyes, he saw the reflection of his own twisted expression. Then those eyes slowly closed, and Chuaning fell backwards. Moran gripped his shoulders in that same instant, his crazed, angry bellow like that of a beast falling to pieces. Chuaning! Chuaning, what did you say? Say it again! The person in his arms did not reply, lips pale as pear blossoms. That handsome face had always looked so aloof, but now, moments before death, it was frozen into a sad smile, a slight curve at the corners of the lips, just like the face in Moran's memories of when he'd first seen him in front of the heaven-piercing tower. A small, gentle smile. Chuaning! That gentleness shattered. High-tongue flowers withered and scattered all over the ground. He finally got what he wanted, treading Shizun's life underfoot as he climbed to the top of the world. But what was this? What was this? The anguish and hatred in his chest only grew worse. What the F was this? A faint black fog gathered in Moran's hand as he quickly tapped Chuaning's meridians, sealing the last remains of his life. Were you hoping to die just like this? Moran's eyes bulged, his expression vicious. I'm not done with you, Chuaning. I still have a score to settle with you. I'm not done. I'm not effing done yet. If you don't say it to me clearly, I'll crush Xuemeng, Kunlun Tashue Palace, and all the people left that you wanted to protect. I'll rip them all to shreds. You better think again. Forget about the ceremony. Screw the thousands of people still kneeling there. He changed his mind. He didn't want Chuaning to die anymore. He hated him. He wanted Chuaning to live. He picked up that person who had lost too much blood in one sweeping motion and, evoking his Qinggong, jumped onto the tall overhanging eaves in one leap, robes fluttering like a lone eagle unfurling its wings. He flew rapidly across one roof after another, headed straight for the southern peak, straight for the Red Lotus Pavilion, where Chuaning had once lived. That place had an abundance of spiritual energy and numerous medicinal herbs. He was going to bring Chuaning back. A person must be alive to be hated. If that person died, there would no longer be a reason to hate them. Had he been out of his mind earlier, wanting to kill Chuaning with his own hands? If Chuaning died, then what did he even have left in this world? Lying in bed, the taste of past memories on his tongue. It was already late at night, but he couldn't sleep at all. Moran got up, washed his face, got dressed, and with a lantern in hand, headed toward Yanlo Hall. Chuaning had definitely just carelessly bandaged his wounds before going there for his punishment by kneeling. Moran knew how he was, stubborn to a fault and unyielding to boot, never giving even an iota of consideration to whether his own body could take it, and Xuemeng couldn't stop him even if he tried. Sure enough, a small lamp could be seen from outside Yanlo Hall, burning by itself, candle wax dripping slowly. Chuaning knelt with his back facing the door, figure straight and upright like a pine. Moran regretted it a little when he saw this figure. It was the middle of the night. What was he doing? Coming here to see Chuaning? Had he gone mad? But he was already here, and it would feel silly to just turn around and leave again. He thought for a moment and settled on a compromise. Lightly, he set the lantern down by his feet. He wouldn't leave, but he wouldn't go in either. Standing outside the window, he propped his elbows up on the frame, rested his cheeks in his hands, and stared at Chuaning from far away. The copper bells hanging from the corners of the roof swayed gently, and the sweet fragrance of the flowers and plants filled the night air. The two of them, one standing, one kneeling, separated by a red latticed window, separated by the empty silence of the hall. If this had been before the rebirth, Moran would have had the authority to stride into the hall and order Chuaning to stop reflecting and go back to rest. If Chuaning refused, he would have had the capacity to seal the movement of his limbs and forcefully carry him off. But right now, he had neither the authority nor the capacity. He wasn't even as tall as Chuaning. Moran's head was all messed up. He watched that person from outside the window, but the person inside never noticed. He couldn't see Chuaning's face, and Chuaning couldn't see his. And so, the white cat knelt all night, never turning around. And so, the dumb dog stood all night, never once leaving. Author's notes. Once upon a time, there was a little puppy. He was dirty and stupid, so nobody liked him, and thus he could only drift around here and there. One day, the little puppy was found by his uncle, and was carried back to his nest. The new nest was warm and spacious. The little puppy was very happy about this, especially the big white cat that was curled up on the cushion sleeping. He looked so gentle. The little puppy howled with an awoo, and joyfully burrowed himself into the white cat's fluff. However, when awake, the big white cat was very different from his imagination. He always watched the little puppy with icy gaze, likewise ignored the puppy's whimpering affection. When he was unhappy, he wouldn't even remember to retract his claws before swatting the puppy across the face. Slowly, the little puppy grew up. The big white cat gradually became a small white cat right in front of his eyes. The big dog wanted to teach the white cat a lesson, and so he bit into the little white cat's throat. Then he proudly trod the bowl of Snow White under his foot. He'd originally thought the other animal hard as a rock, but he now suddenly realized this white cat's body was of such softness. He couldn't help but to remember the night when he'd first entered his new nest, when he'd hidden and fallen into a slumber in the warmth and softness of this kitty's fluff. However, he would never find out, that night, the white cat opened his glass-like eyes. Where had this little thing come from? How dirty, the white cat thought. And then he used his spiked pink tongue and quietly groomed the little puppy's fur clean. The puppy stirred as he was groomed, bleary-eyed, and thought that this was all a dream. He dreamed that his drifting life had finally come to an end, and there was a big cat that treated him with much, much kindness. Oh no! This author's note is like a little alternate universe fan fiction of Moran as the baby puppy and Chuaning as the white cat that's a tsundere who on the inside quietly dotes on him, but on the outside is a tsundere, so he whips him and is really harsh and strict on him. But there's so much miscommunication here. Oh my gosh. Guys! Okay, so to recap chapter 29, Moran, we get to see Moran's flashback of when he was Ta Xianjun. We got to see his thoughts about why he ended up on the path that he did. Pretty much from the moment he joined the sect, he wanted to have Shizun's approval, Shizun's attention, Shizun's love and acceptance. And I know, as we can see from Shizun's point of view, Chuaning does he actually really likes Moran, but he's embarrassed about his own feelings, and so he puts an ice barrier around himself and ends up being kind of cold and harsh towards Moran, unintentionally. And Moran misunderstands it and thinks that Shizun really hates him. And then we get to see him as Ta Xianjun and how he tortured and almost killed his Shizun. But then when Shizun was on the brink of death, he wanted to save him. He didn't want him to die anymore because Chuaning was the only connection he had with his past life. And without him, there'd be nothing left for him. How would he live on without Chuaning, right? Without the person that he quote-unquote hated. The problem here is miscommunication and misunderstandings. Because no one likes to really talk about their feelings and communicate with each other. That's why this whole mess happened in the first place. Oh dear, and I have a feeling because there's so many chapters that the miscommunication will continue to go on. Moran will continue to be a dumb husky, and Shizun will continue to be a tsundere white cat. So let's pray for these guys to get together soon. Let's vouch for them. They got it. Really, they both like each other. It's just they have to speak about it and let their feelings out, you know? Okay, so that's the end of chapter 28 and 29. I hope you enjoyed. It was really interesting to see some more backstory from Moran's point of view. And I hope we get more of this to see what's going on in his mind. So until next time, I'll see you guys. Bye-bye!